Hi, I'm Meredith Pangrace, and I'm here to talk about my book, The Rust Belt Vegan Kitchen. The Rust Belt Vegan Kitchen is a community cookbook with recipes, resources, and stories from home chefs and professional chefs that are making vegan versions of their favorite foods of the Rust Belt. This book is put out by Belt Publishing, which is located right here in Cleveland, Ohio. We're an independent publisher. And while most of the books that we've done since we were founded in 2013 have been nonfiction, we've started to dabble into cookbooks. And so the Rust Belt Vegan Kitchen is our fourth cookbook. And as the creative director of Belt, I was happy to get the opportunity to put this book together. So I will tell you a little bit about myself and a little bit about how this book came to be. And then I'm going to read the introduction, which is my story, but then I'll read a couple other stories from the contributors as well. So I became interested in food and cooking, I think it was my sophomore year at college, where I went to get a job as a hostess in a restaurant, and all the positions were filled, and the only job opening they had was like a sous chef, assistant chef, which I was completely not qualified for. But they were able to train me. And even though I had been a vegetarian by then for already several years, the restaurant happened to be a restaurant that specialized in exotic game meat. So while I didn't have to do too much of the meat preparation, I learned how to do the salads and desserts, make dressings from scratch, make pastries from scratch, all kinds of wonderful things. And then from that point on, I just developed a passion for food and for cooking. And so while my career did not take me in that direction, I went more into design. And this is how I eventually became the designer and creative director at Belt. I still, in my home life, shared that passion for cooking, and especially vegetarian and later vegan cooking. So in working for Belt during the pandemic, we were happy to survive, and we were supported by all of our readers that started buying books directly from us. But we were a little bit slower than usual, and so we all started coming up with ideas for in-house projects, meaning ideas for books that we, the Belt staff, would kind of lead ourselves. And so this was my idea for a book that we could produce in-house. And this is how I came up with the idea. I was doing a lot of experimental cooking during the pandemic, like a lot of us were. We were stuck at home, we were not going out. We had extra free time on our hands, and so my kitchen became a bit of a vegan experimental laboratory. And I started attempting to make dairy replacement products from scratch and protein bars from scratch, cheeses, yogurts, all kinds of wacky things, crackers, and it was just really fun, and it was really exciting, and it was a real challenge. And so I really got excited about it. And it sort of all culminated with a family dinner where I prepared a traditional dinner for my whole family and veganized it with some of our traditional family favorites. I grew up Slovak background, a little bit of German, grew up eating a lot of pierogies, stuffed cabbage, paprikash, those kinds of things, not traditionally vegan foods, but foods that were able to be converted into vegan versions that I thought would be proud of. So I'm going to read my intro now, and it will kind of tell that story in a little bit of a clearer way, and then also how then it evolved into the book. Okay. The humble cabbage. On New Year's Day 2021, I was making dinner to take to my parents' house. Due to the pandemic, our holiday plans had diminished to just a few of us casually gathering for an early supper in jeans and sweaters. It had been a year of fear, loneliness, and loss that we were all ready to say goodbye to. So in the hope of lifting spirits and making the meal still feel special, I decided to make a few family favorites, including the stuffed cabbage. My grandmother had shown me years ago how to steam the cabbage leaves. A little boiling water in the pot, loosely covered, slowly peeling off the outer leaves with tongs one at a time, as they steamed and became soft enough to roll. It was a task that took a quiet patience in my otherwise chaotic kitchen, and it forced me into a moment of reflection. I thought about how she probably learned this same technique from her mother, a Slovak immigrant who came to southern Ohio more than a century ago. I looked at the veins in the cabbage leaves, and they reminded me of my grandma's veined hands and delicate skin. I thought about the cabbage, tough yet humble, a vegetable that was a staple in not just Eastern European immigrant diets, but in so many other culinary traditions in our region. People of all backgrounds who came to the cities of the Rust Belt for work were looking for familiar, affordable ingredients to fill their families' bellies, and they relied on cabbage. I thought about how when I stopped eating meat as a teenager, my grandma would roll a few of her cabbage leaves and fill them with only rice just for me. She didn't understand my choice completely because to her, eating meat was a privilege. To be able to afford to eat meat and to choose not to didn't align with the way she was raised. But nevertheless, she didn't judge me, didn't criticize, and lovingly accommodated my choice with extra servings of potatoes, pasta, and of course cabbage when I came for dinner. Like many of us during the pandemic, I spent a lot of time in my tiny kitchen experimenting, specifically with making things from scratch that I usually buy. Bean burgers, protein bars, dairy-free cheese, yogurt, because I had the time. I experimented with making plant-based versions of dishes I craved, searching for new ingredients online, watching YouTube instructional videos, scrolling Instagram, and ordering more and more cookbooks. All this culminated into a New Year's Day vegan feast of pierogies, paprikash, stuffed cabbage, mashed potatoes, and noodles, all vegan. The meal was worthy of boasting about on social media, so I shared it. There were a lot of comments, questions about how I modified the recipes, drooling face emojis, and pictures of dishes other people were creating. Intrigued, I collected the responses and started reaching out to other local home chefs and professional chefs who had an interest in vegan food. I asked what they were making and why. Some liked the challenge of a new way of cooking. Some mentioned a passion for animals or the environment. Some mentioned a demand for more plant-based foods from their customers. Some mentioned health concerns, allergies, or religious reasons. While the reasons for their inventions varied, the recipes in this book all have something in common. These dishes aren't the avocado and sprout spa menus of the West Coast. The vegan food of the Rust Belt offers comfort and brews nostalgia. The ingredients showcase diversity, flavors, and history of our region. We love eating local here, but it's not easy. Our recipes focus on what is possible in a place where our growing season is limited, and our winters are long and cold. In this book, that means an abundance of winter vegetables, like potatoes and squash, and shelf-stable items like pickles, canned pumpkin, dried mushrooms. But I've included a few showstoppers for those few precious weeks when tomatoes are actually in season. You'll also notice several unpretentious shortcuts because in true Midwestern fashion, we admit that sometimes we just can't do it all. I'd like to think this book is for everyone. If you're not familiar with the food of the Rust Belt, you'll discover Cincinnati chili and Cleveland Polish Boys. If you're not vegan, you'll learn how simple it is to bake a cake without eggs and milk. If you're new to plant-based cooking, I hope this book will present it in a more accessible, less challenging light. And if you're a hardcore vegan or vegetarian, much of this may already be familiar, but I hope you can get a few new ideas and also appreciate that your community is growing even here in the Rust Belt. I want to thank all the chefs that had contributed to this book, their inventions and creativity in coming up with these recipes. Their skills, their talents are so appreciated for making this an engaging, diverse, and flavor-filled book. More than anything, this book is not going to criticize you for whatever choices you make in your diet. It will encourage you to open your mind and enter the Rust Belt Vegan Kitchen. Trust us, it's a delicious place to be. So that pretty much tells the story of the book. In my outreach, I joined tons of Facebook groups and Instagram groups and all kinds of things to find these people and these contributors. And it was such a joy to put the word out there and then get emails every day with these wonderful stories and fantastic recipes. And so in this collection, we have over 60 recipes from all different kinds of people in all the different cities. I've also added a couple things just to kind of get people started. Things that, maybe, again, if you're vegan or vegetarian, you already know, or if you're new to it, that I think you might find helpful. I have a section here on pantry staples, just talking about a few things that you might not be familiar with. Things like black salt, which is a particular salt that is sulfurous and can be used when you're trying to create eggy kind of taste with different kinds of scrambles. There's the definitions of nutritional yeast and aquafaba and agar, some of these like silly titles of things that you may have no clue what they are, but they're actually really easy to work with, easy to find, and they can work some magic in your kitchen laboratory. I also have a section on machinery. While this book does not require anything more than what you're already going to have in your kitchen, there are a few tools that when you are making plant-based food, you might find helpful to have. So we've got that in there. I also have a section, it's called Make It versus Buy It. So in my experimentation, during the pandemic, I was making things like non-dairy yogurt and then buying it and then taste testing it and seeing. So there's a section in here, Make It, Buy It, that just kind of explains like how easy it is to make it. And if you want to try to make it, go for it. You might save yourself some money. Some other things are a little more challenging. The end results, they take a little more skill, so you might want to end up buying it. So we have some tips for you on that. And then the last section that I wrote in here is called What's in This Stuff, which just is kind of a question that I wanted to help people understand. If someone doesn't eat meat, but they eat meat-like products, some people question that because they don't understand. Well, why would you want something to taste like meat or look like meat if you don't want to eat meat? And there's kind of two different camps on that, and so I explain some of that to meat eaters that are wondering what that's all about. There's a couple different sections. We cover breakfast, we cover soups and stews, we cover sandwiches, casseroles and sides, hearty main dishes, party food, and desserts. So there's all kinds of things in here. Like I said, I've told you my story a little bit, and if we still have time, I'd like to just read a couple stories from my contributors. So you can see where these are coming from. And I shared this book with a couple different friends, and one of the friends that went through it said the nicest thing that I felt was so great. She said, when I read your book, I really felt like I got to know each and every one of those people that contributed, because it has a folksy narrative kind of that runs throughout. So you get to kind of know all these people and then try their delicious recipes. So this is from Oscar. Oscar is a professional chef outside of Chicago. His business is called The Chunky Scone, and he has a business making baked goods, vegan baked goods at farmers markets. So Oscar says, scones are very close to my heart because they were one of my first creations when I became vegan. I started my vegan baking goods company in 2015 at a little holiday community market in the neighborhood of Pilsen in Chicago. I have always had some degree of chunkiness in me, so I named it The Chunky Scone. The first day of market, I brought 2 baskets of packaged scones, and to my surprise, all of them sold out. The scones were the key that opened the door to my business, which now creates all kinds of vegan baked goods. They are such an underrated delicacy in the world of baked goods. When people buy and eat my scones, it fills me with joy. This recipe can be completely customized by you. I invite you to get creative with a combination of your favorite ingredients. My personal favorite is chocolate chips with peanut butter. So that was from Oscar. I have a little note here from Chef Chandrea. So she is a caterer here in Cleveland, and she has perfected the Cleveland-style Polish boy. If you're not familiar with the Polish boy, Chef Chandrea is going to tell you here. Polish boy is traditionally a sausage sandwich topped with French fries, barbecue sauce, and coleslaw. As a child, making Polish boys was always an event. My mom would buy special buns and go all out. When I became vegan, I missed the familiar taste of these delicious sandwiches. It can be difficult to find vegan versions, but this one satisfies that and is satisfies that tangy, tasty craving. So in Chef Chandrea's recipe here, she has a from-scratch barbecue sauce, a from-scratch coleslaw, and French fries, and it's really great. Let's see, I have a couple more marked here. I have one here from Heather. So Heather is from Cincinnati, Ohio, and she has her own business making vegan cheese products. Her company is called Mad Cheese. And her recipe here is for a green bean salad that her grandmother used to make. This was originally my great-grandmother's recipe. My great-grandparents, Gran and Pa, immigrated from Germany and lived in New Bremen, Ohio. My father remembers going to their house for lunch every other Sunday. More often than not, this salad was on the table. Pa was a physician and had a custom hutch built for his office in the 1920s. He stored medications on the shelves and files and instruments in the drawers. I now have the hutch and use it in my kitchen. Spices on the shelves and cookware and other ingredients in the drawers. My grandmother lived in Dayton, Ohio. I was very close to her and spent a lot of time at her house. I remember making this salad with her in her kitchen, making it a day before you plan to serve it so it chills overnight and the dressing can really marinate the vegetables. So I like that one too because it really has that connection to her grandparents with an actual physical thing. I have that too. I have my grandma's nut grinder that I use to grind nuts for kolachkis. And the vegan kolachki recipe is in here. It took me a long time to invent that, but I've included that in the book. I also have a large noodle board that I've restored, and when I use those things for my family, it really just has a very powerful thing. And the dedication to the book is to the warm kitchen memories that unite us all, because I think a lot of us can look back and remember times in kitchens with our family where we were gathered around the food to really, show how we all love each other and stuff. So again, this is the Rust Belt Vegan Kitchen book. I've been inspired to do this not only by the other community cookbooks that were put out by Belt. We did a cookie table book and a soup and bread book that were all contributions. But some of my favorites here, my favorite vegan cookbook is this classic one. This is how I got started, how it all began. I think this was from early 2000s, maybe the 90s. A fantastic book to get you started. One of the best ones out there. Also is really inspired by the folksiness of the Moosewood cookbook. While I do love the beautiful cookbooks today with the full color photos and the glossy everything, there's something about the community feel and the folksiness of the Moosewood that just makes it such a classic. This one, I think, gosh, this is probably from either the 70s or 80s, the Dining in Cleveland cookbook. This was just an inspiration for the regional aspect. There are a ton of vegan cookbooks out there, but there is something to doing something more localized and regionalized that I think people in our area are interested in, but then people in other areas that are curious about the Rust Belt, which tends to be more of a meat and potatoes town. Like how do people that don't eat survive here? And then I would hope that everyone somewhere in their family has a beautiful one of these, just a simple notebook that is covered in stains and dog-eared with handwritten recipes from a family member. Again, this is just something that really was a big inspiration for the book. So I myself have a couple recipes in the book of my grandmother's, but like I said, there's a lot of diversity in it. So hopefully you would find something you like in it. Yeah, so Rust Belt Vegan Kitchen from Belt Publishing publishes December 1st. It's available for pre-order now and will be shipping in November. So